Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I would like to ask us, each and every one of you, that if you enjoyed these shows, please hit like, share, and subscribe after you view the show. Thank you very much. Well, hello, world, and welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. I'm Dr. Hal Bradley, executive producer and host of the show, along with my co-host, Pete Turner, who is also the CEO and founder of the Break It Down Show. Pete, if you're in there, wave to the audience, say hi, good morning, finish your breakfast. Love you, brother. Okay, now today, this show is absolutely amazing. It's very personal, close to my heart. It's about being separated from my brothers for 55 years. And only one day, getting reconnected by a chance meeting on Facebook. And today, to share the story with me is my sister-in-law, my sister, Jennifer. And Jennifer, say good morning to my audience.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Yeah, this is really, truly amazing how we came together and met. And I just am so excited about sharing this one today. So I guess I'll start it off with 55 years ago, in the middle of the night, my father woke me up, pulled me out of the bedroom, put me in the car and drove me down to Seattle. We lived north of Seattle during 1967, 68 when this event occurred. And he took me to a bus depot in Seattle, put me on a bus and sent me to my biological mother who lived in Ukiah, California, Mendocino County. Unknowns to my brothers or anybody in the house, I simply vanished. And 54 years later, I'm going through my Facebook accounts and I see this message from someone and it says, "Are you my brother?" I responded back and I asked a couple questions to the person. And he came back with the information, and it was, in fact, my brother that I had not seen in 54 years. The amazing part to all of this was that we lived not 10 minutes apart from each other for over 20 years. I've been in my home 22 years this year. Ron had bought that home years before even that. Mm-hmm. And the miracle of this was that I'm a certified hospice chaplain, 26 years in hospice ministry. And when my brother got a hold of me, he passed away 4 months later. So you can't help but feel that God had a complete hand in all of this. The reunification of brothers and our other brother, Rick, who lived in Marysville. I had tried to find my brothers over the years, but never could locate them. But as I said, just on a chance acquaintance on a Facebook question. Right away, I jumped in the car, drove up to the house, and there was my brother, Ron, standing in the door, tears in his eyes, tears in my eyes. We hugged each other and embraced each other. And I came into the house and met my sister, Jennifer, for the first time. And it's so hard to even put it into words, the feeling that all of us had on Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a moment.
Yeah, I didn't know my brother's physical condition at the time. And because I had asked them to come meet me downtown Everett at a restaurant that we were all familiar with, and he said that he couldn't do it, which is why I came to the house. Yeah. And what was it that he was diagnosed with? Was that MS?
Parkinson's.
Parkinson's, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was in stage 4.
Yeah.
So anyway, over the course of the next 4 months, I got to spend days with my brother. And our other brother, Rick, who's older than us, came one day to see Vaughn. And I opened up the door and I said, "Rick, it's me, it's Hal, your brother." And we stood there, both of us, like literally in shock, held each other, embraced each other. It was just such an amazing moment. And the question both of my brothers had to me was, "What happened? Where did you go?" No one had bothered to tell them. Remember, Jen?
Mm-mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were they had no idea. They were both in the dark about what had happened all these years.
Yeah, I set them down that day and I explained to them how there was a conflict in the family between Mom and myself. Mm-hmm. And they were unaware. And my dad, staying solid to his marriage, this was a stepmother of mine, decided to remove me from the house so he could work on his marriage and send me back to my biological mother. I ended up spending years in California, ended up moving back to Edmonds, Washington. And then in 1969, I got kicked out of school for smoking a cigarette and with 2 other friends. And then my mom had a friend that owned a mining corporation down in Mexico. And they thought rather than having me wander the streets, it would be really good for me to go down there, get exposed to different cultures. And unknown to her, it was the mining operation was a front for heroin processing and marijuana production through the Indians in the valleys that lived up there around the camp at that time.
Mhm.
Later, after my release in the military, I did my years, got out honorably March 14th of 1974, got my GED and went to school uh, to start my college classes. Winter break, I decided to go down and visit my village, and my life transformed. I started smuggling marijuana out of Mexico, later became the largest trafficker of cocaine in the Pacific Northwest history, and the primary target of Operation Northern Exposure. All of this going on, and my brothers aren't more than 20 minutes away from me. It was absolutely amazing. Ended up undercover for the Department of Justice for 17 years, operating in multiple foreign countries, kidnapped once, captured once, on and on and on. So I, in the course of a 8-year sentence that I was given to go into the federal prison system, I was in Leavenworth when I got approached by the Department of Justice. An offer to go to work as a DOJ contractor, was immediately removed from federal prison, came back to Washington State, and again tried in pursuit to find my brothers. Now, this is 1998, and still no luck finding either one of them. And God, it's just so crazy to think about all this right now. But I remember that day, and I'll never forget it. It was what, about a year and a half ago, sis, when Ron.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And well, at this point, I came over and I got to meet him. And God opens one door and will close another, and then he will open another door. And I may have lost a brother, but I gained a sister that I love with all of my heart. And I remember on Ron's deathbed that he whispered into my ear, "Promise me, brother, promise me that you will look out for my wife. You will look out for my son." And I made that deathbed vow. And I hope you're satisfied that I've always kept my word to my brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just so thrilled that I told you I've always wanted an older brother, and who knew that I was going to get one at towards the end of my life. I'll
Yeah, it
take him
was,
any way I can get him.
yeah. And it's been amazing, you and I, the relationship, how it's blossomed and grown. And you are truly my sister to me. And
Yep, absolutely.
you will always be my sister. And I love my nephew very much. I communicate
He
with him.
loves you too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we communicate almost daily online, and
Yeah.
he's just so cool. And
The kid is
he has a disability. Can you
yeah.
describe that to the audience?
Well, there's so many. We've run the gamut of politically correct terms in his lifetime, I think.
Yes.
But basically, it's they call it high functioning autism,
Yeah.
probably more often than not. And it's a communication disorder, and it also affects his emotional the way that he would develop emotionally, so that you've got a 36-year-old young man
Yeah.
with the social functioning of probably a 15, 16-year-old. But luckily for me, a 15 or 16-year-old that isn't getting into trouble all the
Well, and not only that, but what's interesting about autistic children, as is in this case here, they're geniuses. I mean, they are
Yeah,
highly,
he's
highly
really
intelligent.
smart. Yes,
Yeah.
very smart guy.
It's so amazing how we funnel the differences of
I know.
intellect, if you will. And people
Yeah,
look at that as a disability, and I look at it exactly the opposite. I look at it almost with envy because he is
yeah,
so concise with his knowledge,
he
and
is.
and
Yeah, he's definitely gifted
yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Well, what I'd like to talk about today mainly would be about Ron. I want to talk about the life that Ron had during the years that you are aware, and
Yeah.
about his search for his brother and how he found his brother, and how it impacted Ron in the final 4 months of his life. What it meant to him to reconnect with
Hmm.
me and to bring you into our relationship. The relationship between him and Rick was estranged. They were not,
Yes,
yeah, yet even in the facing of Ron's passing, how it brought all of the family back together and unified us.
it really
And
did.
Jennifer, I don't think we're the only family that has a situation like this where
Oh no.
siblings have been separated. But I
Hmm.
think that this is a great victory in a time of great crisis, of great tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was. And I'm sure he had no idea that that was something that was going to happen. But God was faithful to him.
Yes.
He was one of those people that would go out of his way to help others, and he had a particular a heart, I would say, toward those who were struggling in life, including, young people with developmental and other kinds of disabilities. And so when I first met him, I would take Jesse to some activities that were put on by a group in our um, area called Eagle Wings Disability Ministries. And unbeknownst to me, Ron had been volunteering and actually sat on the board of that nonprofit. And
Wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, so I would see him at these different events, and actually, he and my son struck up a friendship over their shared love of collecting coins. Which if my son was here, he would tell me the correct term for that. It's like numismatist or something. Anyways, that's my boy. He'll tell you the exact scientific term for whatever it is you're trying to deal with. So
Boy, does he ever.
he does. He's
Yeah.
funny. Um, so they struck up a really close friendship, and little by little, of course, I was drawn into that. Coming over to see who it is that's buddying up with my son over here. And he was just a really, really kind and generous and wonderful person. He also did a lot of volunteering at his own home church in Marysville, worked at Boeing, and just was really just involved in his community. And I think part of the reason that he was so involved in so many different things is that he missed having family.
Yes.
Um, he and his wife were estranged, lived in different states, his ex-wife and he. And then all of the grown children also lived out of state. And so it was difficult for him. You'd practically have to do a itinerary to be able to visit everybody in one go. Um, but he did the best he could. It got to be so that it was just too much to try to do it all, in one trip.
Yeah.
And little by little, they kind of just, as grown kids will do, they sort of just grew apart. And he tried to stay in their lives as much as he could. Birthdays, Christmases, grandkids, remembering them. And um it just he I could tell when I met him, though, that even with all that was going on in his life, he just seemed like he was lonely. He was missing something.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know him, I didn't know what that something was. But as I got to know him and he shared with me about his family, I would ask him, do you have siblings, and so on and so forth. And of course, he shared with me about Robbie, who passed
Yeah.
as a
Our
younger
older
man.
brother. He
Yeah,
was our yeah. He was our
and
older
then
brother.
he had actually tried to reestablish connection with with David, or Rick as he calls himself, but wasn't able to do so, but had a very close relationship with his son.
Yeah.
So that would have been his nephew.
Yeah.
And so they almost had something similar to a father-son relationship. They were just super close.
Yeah.
And so, I think that for him, just the idea of being able to get back in touch with his family, he kind of put that on the shelf as a dream,
Yeah.
something that might never happen, but something that he would have loved to have had happen. And so, this one day, I'm doing things around the house, and I hear this, Jed, come here. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's hurt himself. He's crashed to the floor or something. It's just one of those tones of voice where it's just like, okay, I'm coming right now. And how he showed me, he said, I think I found my brother Hal. And so then I got to hear the story about, what had happened in your youth, that you had just disappeared, that he'd always wondered what had happened to you.
Yes.
And so he was just extremely excited. And this was probably about 2 months after he had posted on Facebook to friends and family that he was entering hospice.
Yeah.
So he knew he had about 6 months or so left. So I think part of what he was doing is he was just out there really looking for old friends, old acquaintances, and didn't realize he was going to stumble on family,
Yeah.
right?
It's amazing.
What a gift that was. But I mean, he had been doing some work, because I can tell you that for that 6 month period, we had so many people coming through this house. It was just like, I just get cleaned up from the day before, and here would come like 5 or 6 more people. And these were all people that had known him in high school or through churches.
It was wonderful because I was there
Yeah.
when Robin and showed up and Dave showed up and others.
Yes.
We were in the neighborhood together. For God's sakes, we were in the Boy Scouts together.
No.
We're talking early to mid 1960s, and here we all are in that same room.
Yeah.
And we
I
hadn't seen each
know.
other in 55 years. It
So
was just remarkable.
crazy.
And Ron brought us all together.
That was amazing. The joy on his face when you guys were all together in the same
Yeah.
room was just, it was beyond anything. It's like, for me, I was thinking, he got his heaven right then and there, because
Yeah, I agree. Well, and Jennifer, I as a hospice counselor, I've taken over 60 people through the actual dying process. Been there in the moment of death with over 90% of them. And what I remember with Ron, and you were there, you were present when your husband passed away, may he rest in peace, and he does rest in peace. I had reflection in that final 4 months, remembering Ron and I and the Boy Scouts together, remembering one time when him and I got in a fight, and boy, we just so hated that we got in an argument, and we made up the very next day because we were brothers that were never like that.
Yeah.
And I remember the calmness of him, his gentle demeanor. I was always a roughshod, wild kid, always off into crazy stuff. Ron was
Yes.
exactly the opposite. He was compassionate. He was kind. He was caring. He was
Yeah.
quiet. As a child, he was very quiet. And I
Yes.
remember when we would go to Camp 7H, the summer camps, we went to 2, maybe 3 of them together, which was Merit Badge Camp and the Boy Scouts. And I remember Ron would always be like, have a fascination on whatever his merit badge was that he was working on. He would be articulate, where the rest of us were, get the match, jump into the next one, whether it's archery or swimming or knot tying or whatever it was. Ron was different than all of us. He was calm. He was quiet. He was reclusive, and he was always laser focused on the mission at hand. And I remember that so well. And, my love for Ron has always stayed so deep. And over the years of being away from my brothers, the separation process, I don't think there were at least a week went by that I didn't miss my brothers and think of my brothers. And the way Ron found me was he saw an ad about, I'm an action adventure novelist. I've written 12 books. And Ron came across this ad on Facebook to go to drhalbradley.com, and he looked up, and that's when I got the message. It wasn't through my regular Facebook. The message came through. Yeah, it came through the advertisement, and all I saw was this memo line that said, "Are you my brother?" And I clicked. That's how it happened. I clicked on it, and I asked him a couple questions, and he answered back with the exact right answers. And I said, "Ron, I am your brother." And boy, it was just an amazing.
He was so thrilled. He was just so thrilled. I can still remember that day, and just the tone of his voice and his whole countenance changed.
Yeah, well, we loved each other. We grew up in a normal house. We grew up in a normal neighborhood. Everything and back in those years, no one locked the front doors. You left the keys in the car in the driveway, which was unlocked.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, we either had paper routes, or we cut firewood, or we worked on neighbors' yards, or whatever we did. But we were all active young kids that had purpose. And,
absolutely. Yeah. There was no sitting around playing video games in those days.
Nobody had a cell phone back in the 60s.
No cell phones.
But the significance to this meeting, 4 months later, Ron passed. You called
Yeah.
me up, let me know my brother had gone home to be with the Lord. And then the memorial service came at the church. And I remember the gathering, and I remember the day that our brother Rick showed up, and the conflict that he felt, and how he made that beautiful apology on stage to
Yes.
"I may have not been there, but I am there now" type of
Yes.
introduction. And I was so proud of Rick, because Rick, he wasn't like the rest. He didn't go on the Boy Scouts. He didn't enjoin with all of us. He had specific friendships out of the house, and he was more attached to them than he was to the being one of the five brothers.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was just amazing. It was like a miracle unfolding. And I remember when I got up on the stand to say my few moments of reflection with Ron and about
Hmm.
Ron. And I remember looking over at Rook, and he kind of had his head down a little bit, thinking and thought before he got up there and basically gave his apology. And he didn't even owe an apology. That's what was so deep to me. What he did was he had to do a soul cleansing of maybe how Rick approached the relationship of family. Because Rick was always, like I said, when we were kids growing up, he was always like over at his friend's house or always involved in other projects, not the projects that were basically family oriented. And
Right.
I've never held that against Rick. I understood
No.
even as a early on person that that's just who my brother Rick was.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember that day that I opened up the front door when he showed up at your house, sis. And I said, Rick, it's Hal. I'm your brother. It's Hal. And I
Hmm.
remember him just staring at me and freezing. And he walked up to me, and we just shared the biggest embrace in that moment after 54 years of
Hmm.
seeing each other again. In such a sad moment at that, because Rick came
Hmm.
over to say goodbye to Ron. And
Yeah, and Ron had been looking for Rick for
yeah,
months prior to that, and couldn't find him,
well,
through his son. So yeah, it was amazing that it all came together like it did, because he
Well, and then
was.
then Robin and Robin's younger sister, who was
Yes.
always a little tag along kid that wanted to hang out with us when we
Yes.
were
What a
sneaking.
sweetheart. Yeah,
Oh, isn't
I
she
loved
priceless?
her.
She
Yeah.
reminded me of when she was a little kid. For God's sakes,
Yeah.
it was funnier than heck to see
Same
her.
personality.
Yeah, yeah. And Ron was so happy. He was. All of us were there. All of us, and it
Yes.
was almost like a reunion of a family, not just friends.
It was. He
Yeah, and
got, I think, because a lot of those people are believers too. I feel like he got his
yeah,
pre-reunion.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I
Yeah.
absolutely, because I was there,
He
and I
got to see
remember,
everybody. Yeah.
and what was
Yeah. And that
beautiful.
that poor man, I don't know if people understand what Parkinson's really does, but it took this man who was able to print so small that it looked like the stuff that comes out of a warehouse, on those little tiny
Yeah,
warning. He could print that small when I met him. He could type, wonderfully, very articulate, very precise about everything. And what Parkinson's does is that it starts unraveling those neural connections, and
yes,
pretty soon the things that used to work don't work like they used to. Only with Parkinson's, it happens much, much faster. We all deal with that to some degree as we age, but Parkinson's just takes it and fast forwards it really
yes,
quickly. And so all of a sudden you go from one day, being perfectly capable of running a household and doing all these things for yourself, to not being able to hold your own cup, not remembering to make the mortgage payment. And I mean, it happened like that fast. Like one month you're doing these things, and the next month you're not. And so for him to have spent the time that he did to look up all the people, like I said, there were hundreds of people that were contacted. And
yes.
he did that. I didn't do that. He did that. So, I mean, I can just remember him sitting over the computer, just hunting and pecking all day, looking for people, because he wanted to make sure that he saw as many people as he possibly could. You know,
I remember, sister, when
yeah.
I was giving Ron his last rites, and all of us were in that room together as I put my hand upon him, and Rick reached around and put a hand on Ron's shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and I could just feel this vibration of such an intense love
Yes.
between the brothers in that moment,
Yes.
and the awareness and the presence of our friends, our childhood friends, in the room
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the Holy Ghost came upon me and altered the last rites scenario that I've given to so many people over the
Yeah.
years. But Ron's was different. Ron was part of the last rites. He was inclusive in the last
Yes.
rites.
Yes.
And it was at that time when I leaned over and kissed him on the forehead, when he whispered in my ear and said, "Will you promise to look in on my wife and my son?"
Yes.
And of course I honored that promise. But it was such an electrifying moment. You know, like I said earlier, Jennifer, I've taken over 60 people through the actual process where I did their
Right.
last rites, where I would say goodbye and step
Right.
back so their family members could be close in that final moment. And
Absolutely.
I remember I have a picture that was taken of Ron laying there, and
Mhm.
he's looking straight ahead with all of us in the foreground. Do you know the picture I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah, I
I
sent a copy
do.
of it. Yeah,
That's a powerful picture, and most people who have seen it, they're just moved to tears.
yeah, it
They
was
say it's a
powerful.
very emotional, you captured a very emotional moment there. And yeah, I think that there's something about the process of dying that it sort of strips away all the stuff on the outside that maybe, old hurts or old fights or old disagreement. Those things just fall away in the moment. And what you're left with is what you really feel underneath it
Yeah.
all.
His memorial service was absolutely beautiful,
It
just
was,
beautiful.
it was
Yeah, been to
beautiful.
so many. And then we
Yeah.
did you did his military gravesite where you received his flag
Yep.
and an appreciation from the President of the United States and the
Yeah.
military service that he belonged to. And I
Mm.
remember that morning as we were heading to the funeral, to the cemetery to lay him to rest, that I put that sticker on your card, on your car, the one
I
that,
love that.
yeah,
I
I
love
do
that.
too. It was so
Yeah.
special. Unless
And
you've
I've
been
had
handed a folded
comments.
flag.
Yeah, I've had comments about how true that is.
Well, you would know. You were
Yeah,
there. And I was right beside you, sweetheart,
yeah.
when you
And,
received that flag.
when I think of a patriot, I think about how, even though Ron never really saw fighting during his time of service, he
Hey, he
he
took an oath.
traveled.
He took
He
an oath.
traveled,
Yeah.
and he knew, and he just loved his country. I mean, the man truly did. He would
Yes.
tear up at the flag salute. He loved his country, and he held that very dear, throughout the time that I knew him.
Yes.
Would always, this man could not see someone in any kind of military garb without thanking them for their service.
Yes. Yes.
And he was just extremely respectful. And he was involved in a group of people who, some of which actually knew you and didn't know the relationship between the two of you, called Veterans for Worship.
Yeah.
And they would get together about once a week, or once every couple weeks, and they would tell stories and share, and do some studies, and some Bible studies and things. And Ron was actually named the historian of the group because he loved to go back and dig up history,
Yeah.
about
That
different
sounds like Ron.
situations. Yeah. So they called him the professor. He was the historian of the group, and he would dig up stories about different things to present, to the group. And he just loved that. To him, that was the greatest honor to be able to do that.
Well,
But
you
that
know, sister, we veterans, I was a veteran during the Vietnam War. I mean,
right.
I came out during the ending, towards the end of the war, and people
Mhm.
didn't like us. They said bad
No.
things to us. If they saw
Yep.
you in uniform, you were scorned. And that's why
Hmm.
today, when we see fellow veterans out there, we embrace them. We thank them for their service. It means so very much to us. As you know, our
Absolutely.
older brother John was a Purple Heart recipient. He was wounded in
Yes.
1968 in the Battle of
Yes.
Quezon, and ended up serving his country for 23 years in the United States Marine Corps before he retired out.
Yeah.
And it was always it was so good that I could tell Ron these things about our brother. But you have to
Yes.
understand something, Jennifer. When we were 17, 18, and we stood there and we took that oath to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to obey the Constitution of this great nation, we took it to heart. It
Of
meant
course you
something
did.
to us.
Yes.
And you see Ron, and you see me, even to this day, how I work with the homeless veterans societies and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's an honor. It's an honor
Mm-hmm.
to serve in such a capacity. And you sit there and you help with food for them. You bring it over to me so we can get people
Well,
fed.
yeah.
I mean, we absolutely love the ministry created. And you and I would not be doing these things together had it not been for Ron finding his
That's
brother
true.
after
Yeah,
54 years. And
absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
it also helped us, Jennifer, because it gave Rick, Ron, and I closure.
It did indeed. It did indeed. And Rick too.
Yeah,
Rick
exactly.
too. That kind of it was always just hanging out there that they were estranged, and it was a sad situation. And to see him to be able to come around and actually, open up his heart, and it was a good thing. I think that there was a lot of healing that was done in that.
There was for all three of us brothers. Just the
Yeah,
bond. The bond had never left any of us. How crazy, huh?
I know.
All of those years. You saw the love that Ron and I had in those days I was
Well,
coming.
yeah, you grew up together.
Yeah, we were.
Your guys are brothers.
And then, like a thief in the night, I was gone. And
I know.
it haunted me for a half a century. I so wanted to see my brothers. I so wanted
Yeah,
to tell them what happened and to tell them that I loved them and to let
right.
them know that they never left my heart, my thoughts, and God did that. God granted us
He
this moment.
absolutely did. Yeah,
It
he
was wonderful.
absolutely did. He met that need in each of your hearts.
He did, and gave me a
Mm.
sister. Gave me
Yeah.
a sister. How crazy is that? And and look at the love that you and I carry for each other. It's just
Yeah.
amazing because
Yeah.
it's natural, it's real. You
Yeah.
wanted an older brother, I wanted
I did.
another sister,
Yep.
And God met that need according to His glory, not ours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's great. It's
Sister, I want to
wonderful.
thank you today for coming on the show and being brave and courageous and
Oh,
lifting up these memories of Ron. And I know how hard it's been. I've watched the struggle of your loss over the last year since we laid him to rest. And
mm-hmm.
I've come over and I've had concerns, but you're doing really well with it. And you
Thank
carry
you.
his memory with honor and with pride. And he would knowingly feel that. And I know that he sees you and he shows you that he's still in your life in certain
Mm-hmm.
little things that happen. You've told me. And it's kind of
Yes.
cool. Some a bird will land a certain way or some other
Mm-hmm.
thought will come into play and you'll give me a call and you go, well, Ron just popped in, and I get it.
Yes.
I
Yes. Yeah. And the things he loved his M&Ms, and he loved his dad's root
yeah,
beer. And to this day we cannot see either one of those things without, oh, that's Ron
yeah.
reminding us he's still around.
And as long as we keep him in our memories, he is alive. He
He
stays
is.
with
He's
us.
alive in our memory. Yeah, absolutely he is.
Well, listen, sister, before we close up here today, I wondered and wanted to know if you had a specific message that you would like to share with my audience today. You are such a holy woman. You are so
Oh,
devoted to
thank
your
you.
faith in God through Christ. And I love it when you pray because even when I'm not present, I feel the presence of your prayer. And then I will talk to you about it and you will tell me, yes, I was praying for this at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to close out the show today with you giving a thoughtful reflection to the audience. What do you want them to take from this interview?
Well, I think more than anything else, just because in my own life, it's, I look back on my life and it's such a testimony of God's grace and what God is able to accomplish in any life, regardless. And I think that what's resounding in my spirit, probably more than anything else, is that I just want people to realize that it's never too late with God. It's
Yeah.
never too late. You could be estranged from someone you love for 55 years,
Yes.
and God can work it out in such a way that you not only get to be with that person, but people you probably thought you would never see again. And that He can orchestrate such a thing that we as human beings could never imagine we could do. And the Bible talks about that our eyes have not seen and our ears have not heard and our minds have not comprehended the things that God has for those who love him. And
Yes.
I really, over and over again, I really see that repeated. I saw it in Ron's life. I see it in my family's life. I see it in my life. I see it over and over again, how he can just create a situation where we thought that it would never happen, or we could have never imagined that it could, and yet it does. And that is just, to me, that's God. That's who he is. That's the
Yes.
heart of our Father in heaven, is to do those types of things, and just kind of blow us out of the water at how much he loves us, and what he's able to do even above and beyond what we think. Um,
Amen.
yeah, and just never to forget that it's never too late with him.
Well, as I close out the show today, sister, I want to tell you how much I love you, how much I
I
love
love
my
you too.
nephew. I'm
Yeah.
so honored to have a sister in my life that is a
Oh,
God fearing woman and so caring. And the homeless community that I serve, that you assist in, they love you and appreciate you too. And they even tell me, please tell the lady, please, they call you the lady,
mm,
please tell the lady how much we appreciate this meal today. So,
absolutely.
your servitude, your ministry is reaching forth in unknown regions.
Oh,
So, as we close out the show today, I want to say thank you. God bless you. God
thank
be with
you.
you and God keep you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sister.
Thank
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted in within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors.